is kind of a large room for not this big of a crowd, but I wasn't sure how many to expect. So I think this will be great. And I did record it, yep. There are people that could be watching on Zoom. So when Dr. McBride does get up here, he will be restricted to the podium only for the sake of the microphone. And hopefully some people would join via Zoom now and later. I am Sonia Luder. I'm the director of the School of Family Studies and Human Services. I see a lot of familiar faces and a lot of new faces. So I'm excited that some of our colleagues across campus and some of our students were able to come join us today. We're really excited to explore our early childhood development lab and revitalize it and get some new partners involved with it. It's called Hoffland Stonehouse Early Childhood Lab. It's on North Manhattan. For those of you who may not know, I think maybe everybody in here does know where it's located physically. It's a very old program, 90 years old this year. Is that right? And what we have done is there is an expert in the country that we were lucky enough to bring to campus, Dr. Brent McBride. He's from the University of Illinois, and he has visited a number of early childhood development labs, much like ours at Stonehouse, and provided some of his insight and some of his knowledge and expertise. He's extremely familiar with land-grant universities such as ours, so that's also a really nice perspective that he's able to provide. And so today he's going to share with us his vision for the future of child development labs. I imagine he'll give some of the history of how they started and how they've evolved over time and how they fit within the current climate of the university. So again, we're really excited for these partnerships that may be able to develop as a result of this and get conversations going. And I thank you very much for flying in late last night and being here with us for a few days. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Tough crowd. I am a former preschool teacher. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Perfect. Yay, yay. I'm at home now. Dr. Letter, I appreciate the invitation to come out, meet with all of you guys, talk a little bit about my perspective on laboratory schools, and to plant some seeds. Okay, what I'm going to do today, well, let's go right to the slide so you can see what I'm going to do. See if that works. It did not work. Here we go. Okay, in terms of presentation overview, I've got to stay right here by this microphone. Several things I want to achieve. First off, I want to give you a little bit of a historical perspective of the Child Development Laboratory, or CDL, at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. There are 3 campuses, so I got to make sure I say Urbana-Champaign. We are a relatively newcomer. We celebrated our 75th anniversary 2 years ago, so we're not quite as experienced as you folks here are. Then I also want to talk a little bit about what it is that we are right now. We are very different than we were back in 1941 when the program first came online on our campus. Then I want to talk a little bit about how we address our academic mission on the University of Illinois campus. There are several things that we do to address that academic mission. Then I want to talk to you about my main message. The main thing that I want you to take away from this brief 45, 50-minute conversation is what role can child development laboratories play in generating new knowledge, very broadly defined. And as I present these ideas of how we at the University of Illinois generate new knowledge, I want you to remember, I've been at Illinois for 30 years. This has been a work in progress. It's still in progress. But we have focused continually on how can we do things better in terms of expanding the ways we generate new knowledge. So don't walk away from this presentation and think, my God, we'll never be able to do that. Why even try? I want to plant the seeds, let you start thinking about some other alternatives. Then I want to talk a little bit about how do you balance all the things that you're going to see I'm going to talk about with the service of providing high quality early care and education for children under the age of 5. That's a tough balancing act sometimes. And then I want to talk a little bit about how can we do the things that we do at Illinois in such a fashion that it does minimal disruption to the day-to-day lives of the children. So what kind of infrastructures do you need to support these kinds of activities? And then I want to talk a little bit about the lessons I've learned for the past 30 years. I'm constantly pushing myself to think outside the box. I constantly push my staff to think outside of the box, and we look for new and different ways, and we learn lessons. Not always good lessons, sometimes not so good. And then hopefully we'll have some time at the end for some questions. Now, in terms of the historical perspective, again, we celebrated our 75th anniversary a couple years ago. We were created in 1941, and in the world of laboratory schools, especially laboratory schools at land-grant institutions, we were a very late comer. Back in the 1920s and 30s, when the child study movement was taking place, when the scientific method was being used to study young children's growth and development, at land-grant institutions like KSU, lab schools started popping up as a way to providing subject pools for the study and the development of normative data on children's development. One of the things that makes our program a little bit unique, Nellie Perkins, Dr. Perkins, the founder of the CDL at the University of Illinois, she was a chemist by training. She was a PhD chemist. She came from Cornell University, but they recruited her to specifically start this child development laboratory. The building it was housed in originally is in now what's called the English building, or our quad. When I first arrived on our campus back in 1990, I was walking along the quad. I said, I need to go in there, see where our history was. Didn't look anything like some of the pictures that you see of what the building looks like. From the 1950s and 60s, the programming changed. In 1955, a new building was built, and the only reason I'm talking about this new building back in 1955, it was a recruitment and a retention tool for Dr. Perkins. At that point in time, she had established herself as one of the leaders in the field of child development, and she was being very actively recruited. So the university, we looked into archives and so on, we were able to pull out documentation. The university built the Child Development Laboratory building as a way of keeping her there. It was a building that was designed to be a laboratory environment for the study of children's growth and development. So everything that went into that facility was created to create this environment that she could do her work, she could train her students, she could produce the research that was supposed to be what her job was on the University of Illinois campus. Now, we've learned a lot since 1955 about children's environment. So if I built a building in 2020, I would build it very differently, but it still works. In 2003, we had an expansion. A new building was built on our campus. Actually, it was built right next door to the old building. Now, I'm not foolish enough to think that the provost and the chancellor was going to build me a new lab school. That's not what they were doing. At that point in time, the university was getting a lot of pressure in that they were not doing much in terms of supporting the child care needs of the university and the Champaign-Urbana community. So they thought, well, we can get them off our back. I mean, they even had things like baby days where employees would take their babies to the administration buildings and park out in the hallways and stuff and bang on drums to get the babies upset and so on. And they had to get them off their back. So they said, well, let's build a new child care building and get them off our back. But they had enough foresight to know that the University of Illinois should not be engaged in the child care business unless there is a way to clearly articulate how it supports and is integrated into teaching, research, and outreach and engagement activities. By that time, we had an extensive history of providing full-day child care in the old building that was old back in new back in 1955, of providing full-day, high-quality early care and education, while at the same time supporting undergraduate and graduate education and research activities, and also the outreach activities associated with land-grant institutions. So they built this building, they designed it in such a way that it would truly be a laboratory school environment. In terms of who we are right now, 2 buildings right next door to each other. We serve 160 children. Again, it's a high-quality early care and education program. We've been accredited since 1990, which, as most of you know, it means we go well beyond licensing requirements in terms of early care and education settings. There are a lot of limitations to the NACE accreditation system, but we go through that process. In fact, we're in the midst of going through that accreditation process. As I was telling Jennifer on the way over, we have 2 buildings. In NACE's infinite wisdom, because each building had more than 60 children in it, we had to have 2 separate accreditations. We just went through the validation visit in early fall semester for the old building. We received the accreditation decision, so we were reaccredited right before the holidays. We're in our 3-month window when our validation visit could happen for the other building. So bottom line is, we've got that stamp or seal of approval. In terms of who it is that we serve 160 children. We start with babies as young as 6 weeks, all the way up until they go off to their transition to their kindergarten experiences. So in theory, we could have children in our program. Once the child is enrolled in our program, they can stay enrolled as long as the need is there for the family. So we could, in theory, keep these children for 6 years total. We have 12 full-day early care and education classrooms, 44 full-time staff members. We do employ a lot of undergraduate students to help with breaks and lunch coverage and so on. And right now, we have about a $1.4 million annual operating budget. In terms of who it is that is enrolled in our program, because enrollment is critical to allow us to support teaching, research, and outreach and engagement. We basically entered into an agreement with the university that we would stratify our enrollment. So it's not based on first come, first serve. It's not based on the fact that if you're a faculty, you get your kid in. If you're a student, it doesn't automatically mean you get your child in as well. So 25% of our children are children of faculty, 25% are children of support staff, 25% are children of students, both graduate and undergraduate, and 25% are community families. And those community families have no formal relationship with the university other than the fact that their child goes to the Child Development Laboratory. Across all 160 enrollment slots, about 1/3 of those children come from low-income homes. We participate in the CCAP program, the Child Care Assistance Program, so those families are receiving subsidized child care vouchers. For our student parents, we have a C-Campus grant from the U.S. Department of Education to support child care needs for low-income undergraduate students as well. Result is, it's not a faculty club. Result is, it's not a grunt child care program. It is a truly diverse environment with children from all walks of life. Now, high quality early care and education, it's a wonderful place to be. My daughter went through the program. Yeah, she was able to get lucky to get in and so on. But that's not what we exist on the University of Illinois campus. We are there to support teaching. We are there to support research, and we are there to support outreach and engagement. We at Illinois are in the College of Agriculture, Consumer, and Environmental Sciences. Back in the day when the home ec programs went away, a lot of them were in colleges of agriculture and so on. Our program is still in the College of Agriculture, Consumer, and Environmental Sciences. The good analogy for how we balance a service with an academic activity. Some of my colleagues over in animal sciences, they have this undergraduate class, and they teach undergraduate students how to raise livestock to get the best cuts of meat. And then they show them what you do when you have these cows and pigs. You can tell I'm not an animal scientist, on what you do to get the best carcasses to produce the best meat. Well, a byproduct of that learning experience for those undergraduate students is they have a lot of meat that they have to get rid of. So every Wednesday and Friday morning, the Meat Sciences Lab opens up their doors to the general public. You can go buy the best cuts of meat in Champaign, Urbana at really ridiculously low cost. So the meat sales is just a byproduct of what they're really doing to support academic activities. That's the same way that we approach what we do with our children. That's just a byproduct of what we do to support teaching, research, and outreach and engagement. Now, we could not do that unless we had high quality early care and education. Otherwise, nobody would enroll their children in our program. So it's not like we run them around like a bunch of rats in mazes and things like that. We're not constantly pulling them out to go through different kinds of experiments. We give them a good quality early experience. But that's not the reason why we're there. And you're going to see why that's important a little bit later. Now, in terms of what we do to address our academic mission, on an annual basis, we get anywhere from, in terms of teaching, we get anywhere from 75 what we call field study students. These are student teacher practicum students, internship students, and so on. About 2/3 of them come from my own department. The other third come from across campus. It could be social work, it could be special ed, it could be an integrated health sciences program. They come from all over. Every year we get 3,500 to 4,000 student observers. They come to our program to observe our children as part of requirement for their courses. They're learning about some aspect of development, and the one way you do that is you watch development. So if you're enrolled in a kinesiology, 262 class, which is a motor skills course, and you're learning about ages and stages of motor skill, or motor development, walking and so on, you can learn about how something like gait symmetry might set in for a toddler as they're learning to walk unassisted by reading. You might learn a little bit more by watching a video. You truly don't understand the relationship between environment and walking and gait symmetry for a toddler who's just learning to walk until you see it in real action. Kinesiology 262 students come over on a weekly basis to observe things like that. We also get what we call student class projects every year, close to 1,500 student class projects. Student class projects are when students are enrolled in courses, and as part of the course requirement, they have to demonstrate some sort of a competency or a skill. And the only way they can demonstrate that competency or skill is to have direct interaction with children or in classroom environments. For example, I co-teach a developmental assessment course every fall semester. Students enrolled in this course are learning the ins and outs of standardized assessments with young children, appropriate, inappropriate uses with young children. They get trained on a couple different assessment tools like the Bailey Infant Neural Screener or the Denver 2 Screener and so on. And they have to demonstrate competency in doing it through some practice with their peers. But then they get assigned children to truly demonstrate competency by screening our kids in the lab school with these different instruments that they're trained on under supervision. So every fall semester, all 160 of my children get a screening, which is required by NACE accreditation, but at the same time, we're addressing the educational needs for these undergraduate students enrolled in this course. So we get a lot of these class projects every year. In terms of research, we get 20 to 25 research projects coming through our door every year. About 2/3 of these projects are faculty investigators generating the research projects. About 1/3 of them are graduate and undergraduates, students doing things like for master's thesis, doctoral dissertation, undergraduate, senior theses types of projects. These projects come to us all across campus. A lot of different paradigms are represented in the research that comes through our doors. A lot of different methodologies are used in these different projects. And it's a very rich and exciting thing to witness every year to see what comes through the door. In terms of outreach, my staff are the go-to people in the Champaign-Urbana community, and really the East Central Illinois. They typically provide guidance and support to early childhood programs in the communities through serving on boards, advisory boards, through serving technical assistance and training, doing CDA credential advisors for students going through that type of process. Some of them write for professional publications that are geared for teachers, but the bottom line is we have as one of our goals is to share the expertise of the Child Development Laboratory beyond the boundaries of the program, beyond the boundaries of the campus and into the community so we can have an impact on the community as well. Now, in terms of the most recent completed academic year, 2018 and 19, we were very busy. We had a total of 14 unique research projects that came through our door last academic year. We had 3,273 student observations coming through our door last year. 29 different courses were supported through these observations. 2 Parkland College, which is a local community college, and 1 from Erickson Institute up there in Chicago. We had 1,308 student class projects in support of students enrolled in 31 different unique courses on our campus. And we had 51 internship students. Very, very busy. But again, the quality of the early care and education that the children were experiencing, they didn't know it. They had no idea that this was going on. Because we integrate service with our academic mission, we were able to enhance the learning experiences, the research experiences, and the teaching experiences of faculty and staff in 6 of the different colleges on our campus, as well as the School of Social Work. So this means we weren't only doing things to support human development and family studies. We weren't only supporting my colleagues in nutritional sciences and some of the other programs in the College of Agriculture, Consumer, and Environmental Sciences. We were truly supporting educational research activities on our campus, broadly defined, through the different colleges. Now, like I said earlier, one of the things that I try to communicate to people looking at lab schools and how can lab schools become more truly integrated into the academic missions of the host institution is we need to think of ourselves as a generator of new knowledge. But we need to do that in the sense that generation of new knowledge is very broadly defined from my perspective. You don't have to be at a high-powered research one institution like the University of Illinois where research, and then you might teach every once in a while, but it's research. You generate new knowledge in multiple ways through lab schools. So what I want to do next is just go through some examples of the different ways in which we approach generating new knowledge, broadly defined through our lab school activities, integration of teaching, research, and outreach. So you can see that it isn't just supporting the researchers who come in with a lot of dollars and a lot of knowledge, so to speak. Some examples, generating new knowledge, very broadly defined. These are examples in the past 2 to 3 years of different kinds of projects that have come through our door that I would constitute we're generating new knowledge. For example, undergraduate research. We do support undergraduate students on our campus who are doing senior thesis projects. And oftentimes these senior thesis projects come to us from departments other than human development family studies, other than early childhood education. For example, this student here came to us from industrial design. And for whatever reason, he came up with the idea that what he would like to do for his senior thesis project would come up with a better ergonomically developed high chair that would meet the needs of early care providers working with young babies. Because if you can imagine, if you're working in a classroom with 8 babies and you're doing this all day long, that's going to be hard on your back. So he immersed himself for a semester working across my 3 infant classrooms, working with my teachers, talking with them about what they currently had, what works, what didn't work. And then at the end of the semester, he came up with 3 different prototypes of a new type of a high chair that would better meet the needs of my teachers. Presented them to the teachers voted on the best design, and then he came up with a prototype. And he gave it to the classrooms, one of the classrooms, and they used it and they found out it was really effective. We generated new knowledge for this student. We generated new knowledge for the industrial design department as well by thinking outside the box. Another example of generating new knowledge. We often are engaged in graduate student training. For example, we worked with Dr. Donovan over in Food Science and Human Nutrition and Nutritional Sciences in this course called Pediatric Clinical Nutrition. One of the things that she has students enrolled in this course do is how do you do intake assessments through non-traditional ways. Non-traditional ways is you do observations, weighing, and so on. How do you interview young children to find out what they eat, what their food preferences are like, and so on? She had her students trying to develop those skills by interviewing my children and our children, not my children, our children in the lab school to try to see if they could tap in to things like food preferences, food dislikes, food allergies, all these different kinds of things that from a nutritional point of view are very important to know, both for educators and for families as well. Again, for that cohort of students enrolled in that course, we helped generate a new set of knowledge for them, very broadly defined. Another example, we do a lot of work supporting doctoral dissertation research. This is probably one of my most favorite dissertation projects that have come through our doors in the past 4 or 5 years. Joe Wachtel, he was a music ed major, but Joe was one of these laid back, if you didn't know better, you'd say he was straight from the 60s. I mean, he had the ponytail, the whole bit going, the grunge look, but he really wanted to immerse himself in children's environments to see how they develop an understanding of music and musical concepts and principles. So he took an ethnographic approach to data collection. He became part of our classroom in one of our 2-year-old classes. He was there on a day-to-day basis. He started out just hanging out, not doing much, not trying to instill himself in any relationships or peer situations and so on, but just figuring out what the kids were doing and let them figure out about him. And he slowly became a participant observer in doing his data collection. So it got to the point where when Joe was there, he was just another one of the kids. And that opened up a whole new way of him exploring about musical concepts as he continually brought in different kinds of musical instruments and they played. And he took copious notes and so on. It was a wonderful dissertation. But again, not something you would typically think of. Another example of generating new knowledge. Sometimes we don't have the kind of facilities, we don't have the kind of numbers to generate large-scale NIH-funded projects. But we do have the capacity to help researchers develop the tools to do projects that are NIH-funded. For example, Dr. Garcia Turan, she does a lot of work, she's in nutritional sciences and food science and human nutrition, looking at different influences on the gut microbiome and how that impacts behavior. And she was developing a proposal about 2 years ago that she submitted as an R01 project to NIH to look at different kinds of interventions to change the gut microbiome on children's behavior and so on. But one of the things that she was proposing to do is to do a novel way of assessing gut microbiome other than taking stool samples or poop samples. So she came up with this concept of taking breath. Our children would breathe into this little balloon type device and it would capture what's going on in their stomachs. I don't truly understand all of it. And she used our children to establish the feasibility of this methodology, which then became part of her proposal, which then became funded. And now she's implementing this protocol throughout East Central Illinois. Again, we're not supporting the research for her NIH project. We supported her to generate knowledge that she was used to be able to be successful in generating NIH support. Another example, instrumentation work. Oftentimes researchers who want to do new and novel projects have to develop the tools to do so. We had a team, Dr. Fees in my department and a couple other folks up in Chicago, were working on this project. We're trying to identify the best ways to gather body movement information on children other than just pure accelerometers. And we know with preschool age children, when you put accelerometers on the wrist, what does a kid do? They, whoa, whoa, whoa. And that doesn't give you a true sense of what the activity is. We also know that when you put accelerometers or instruments to measure movement for young children, they don't move like you and I do. When I go out, I don't run. When my wife goes out and runs, she runs 4 miles nonstop. And that accelerometer, or it's a fitness tracking device, is tracking everything she's doing. If you ever watched a preschooler, 2 minutes, and then 15 minutes, and then 2 minutes, and then 15 minutes. So they were developing some different types of tools. Does it make sense to put it around their wrist? Does it make sense to put it around their waist? Does it make sense to put it around their ankle? What do you do when they're doing small group activities or sitting on the rug and so on? So they did a lot of instrumentation work to develop information, new knowledge to put in grant proposal. Another example, we oftentimes, not often, but we sometimes work in collaboration with outside entities. Last summer, on the University of Illinois campus in the research park, Abbott Nutrition has a large facility there. They hire a lot of our graduate students in nutritional sciences and so on. 2 sensory scientists from Abbott Nutrition spent the summer with us trying to develop a new protocol to assess the acceptability of new and novel flavors with nonverbal children, infants and toddlers. And Abbott Nutrition, one of the main makers of these supplements like Pedialyte, Pediasure, and they were getting a lot of pressure. The orange flavoring in Pedialyte and Pediasure makes children aversive to orange. So they were trying to figure out, if we develop new flavorings to put in these supplements, what can we do to find out whether kids like it or not like it with nonverbal children? So they spent the entire summer running kids through different types of protocols with a nutritional sciences doc student, trying to assess body, facial images, eye gazes, noises that they were making. You know, they can't even do what we do with preschoolers. Is it the happy face, the flat face, or the frowny face? They can't even do that. But yet, who do we provide these substances to? Pedialyte, Pediasure? Babies and toddlers who can't tell us, ew, it tastes terrible. And we definitely don't want to develop an aversion to different flavorings, especially fruit-related flavorings. Another example of the way we support the generation of new knowledge. We oftentimes will have researchers who are relatively new on campus, very limited in resources in terms of funding, external funding and so on, and they're looking for systems that help them gather data in a low-cost, efficient way. And oftentimes we will work like we did with Dr. Simpion. He was a new professor, assistant professor over in psychology, and he had a joint appointment with speech and hearing sciences. He was looking at a project looking at how children understand new and novel verbs. Don't truly understand what he was trying to get at, but he had a good idea what he was trying to do. He had a small grant from the Spencer Foundation, $30,000. $30,000 in our world doesn't go very far for research data collection, but he was able to capitalize on the systems that we have in place. So once he developed his protocol for assessing the understanding of these novel verbs, he trained our staff to do it for him. And we were able to support him, and he's now very successful in generating outside support for his research. Another example of generating new knowledge. Oftentimes, researchers don't have a clue how to collect data from children in naturally occurring environments. We had a professor over in, no, this is the wrong one, I can't even see. Okay, I got it. This is the impact childcare, okay, yeah. It is the one I thought it was. We had a professor who came to us, and she was really concerned about the impact of group settings on children's dietary intake. And there is no good, efficient, cost-effective way of gathering dietary intake data in a group care context. The gold standard, which was established at the University of Illinois with Dr. Birch and some of her colleagues, doing all this pre and post weighting on pre-plated food and so on, that's a very labor-intensive process. So what Dr. Kim was wanting to do was try to figure out how could we assess what kids are eating, how much they're eating in a very natural occurring way. So she had her graduate students working with my teachers to come up with some self-report measures that the teachers could use in a very quick and efficient fashion to measure dietary intake. It was a good collaboration. My teachers learned a lot from it. The graduate students learned a lot from it. Dr. Kim learned a lot from it too. So we generate new knowledge in that way. Another example, we sometimes do have the large-scale projects that come through our door. Dr. Broody, I don't know if any of you know Dr. Broody. Dr. Broody is the go-to person on young children's understanding of numeracy and number concepts. All of his work that he's developed and published on for the past 20, 25 years has been done at the Child Development Laboratory. We're just getting ready this spring semester. We're launching another round of data collection for Dr. Broody and his staff. We work very labor intensive with his team. He's got like 7 different people on his team that come in. This protocol that we have going on right now that was started this week actually, every child in our program from 36 months on age up will get assessed 8 different times over the course of the semester. So you can imagine the logistical nightmare that this is creating, but there's a reason behind the science that he's doing that. We have systems in place to minimize how that would disrupt what's going on. So we are supporting Dr. Broody's work that way. We also support the generation of new knowledge from very atypical disciplines. It's not child development always, not special ed, not early childhood education. We also often see faculty coming to us from departments across campus that you wouldn't normally think of. Probably the most interesting example of that is what Dr. Polk did with us. This has been about 4 years ago now. He was wanting to look at children's gait symmetry from an evolutionary perspective. And he developed a really fascinating data collection tool. He basically brought in these huge platforms that he would set up in the hallways of our building, both buildings. On the platform were these sensor mats, and as the children would walk on these sensor mats, it would be sending the information to computers, so in real time you could see what's going on with their footprints, and the platforms that they were on could be adjusted. So he would make them go up, make them go down, make them split, make them come together, and watch what was happening from the child's perspective and symmetry. And what did the older toddlers, all the way to the preschoolers, the 4 and 5-year-olds we had, how did they navigate these changes? But then when he wrote it all up, it was from a very evolutionary perspective. So again, generating new knowledge from an atypical discipline. Not too often do anthropologists come to lab schools. Another atypical example, we had a person a couple years ago, Dr. Sullivan from landscape architecture. He's the guru of studies that look at the impact of green space on children's functioning, especially children with disabilities, and how it impacts brain development and so on. He came to us with an idea for a project. He wanted to look at the differences between artificial play spaces and naturally occurring play spaces and how that impacts social relationships. Now, we have very artificial playgrounds on both of our buildings. You can see a picture of one of them right there. Great playgrounds, very challenging for motor skill development, cushion for the fall zones and all that stuff. And then in one of the community parks, we have what I consider to be a phenomenal natural playscape for children. So he trained his graduate students to just do these observational data collection looking at peer relationships in these 2 environments. And he would have children enrolled in CDL playing and observing them and their peers on our playgrounds, and then observing those same children when they go to the playscape in the park district. Very interesting collaboration with an atypical discipline, landscape architecture. Again, you don't typically see that in lab schools. Another atypical discipline in terms of generating new knowledge was Dr. Nelson over in advertising. She did a study in my 30 years at the CDL. This particular study is the one I've gotten the most pushback from my staff. Basically, it was a focus group interview study. That's what advertising people do. They gather all their data in focus groups. She and her grad students came in and ran a series of focus groups in my preschool classrooms. And basically what she was doing was trying to figure out from the child's perspective why Barbie was losing market share to the Bratz dolls. That seemed like a good task to do from an advertising perspective. My teachers hated it. First off, they hated the fact that they were running these focus groups in the classroom while everything else was going on. Second, they hated it because they were setting up these scenarios, pitting the Bratz dolls and the Barbie dolls together, and we were introducing conversations to them about these dolls and attributes and so on that they don't want to introduce to the children. But again, we as a lab school have to support the generation of new knowledge, and Michelle could not have done this in most places. So again, atypical discipline. Another example of what we do that's very, very important, as a land-grant institution, just like Kansas State is, one of the things that we pride ourselves on is we do policy-relevant research. We don't generate new knowledge just for the sake of generating new knowledge and get a few publications, maybe another grant. We want to make a change on policy and practice. A couple years ago, the U.S. Administration for Children and Families at HHS came out with these new policies about child care programs. If they were receiving subsidies from ACF, had to ensure that all children, for every hour of enrollment, the children would have opportunities to be engaged in 15 minutes per hour of moderate to vigorous physical activity. Now, in the infinite wisdom of ACF, I like ACF, they funded a lot of my research, but in the infinite wisdom of their policymaking practice, there is no science base that tells us what does 15 minutes of moderate physical activity look like in a child care program? What does 15 minutes of vigorous physical activity look like in a child care program? So what Dr. Zhu did in his graduate students, he came on a regular basis 2 summers ago actually, 3 summers ago. And basically he had his team of students that would come up, wire up the kids with accelerometers at different places. They would put these t-shirts on. The t-shirts had these reflective discs at different places, and they were long t-shirts that went well below their waist. Then trained these high-speed motion cameras on the kid as the kid was walking around, and everything was hooked up wirelessly, feeding into a computer. So then he would have them start by just standing there on the playground, and he would get his baseline data. And then he would have them do things like walk in place, run in place, jump up and down, run around on the playground, the bike track, go up and down the climber one time, go down the slide backwards, doing all these different things, trying to identify what can we say is a good cut point using these accelerometer types of tools to say this is moderate activity, this is vigorous activity. Up until that point, we had no science to guide those kinds of decisions. So again, informing policy and practice. Another type of example, sometimes researchers in our infinite pinhead wisdom come up with these grandiose ideas that are very difficult to actually implement with children, young children. And I am one of those pinheads. I do a lot with lab schools, but I also have a very active program of research as well. One of my nutritional sciences colleagues and I, we have secured funding to do a yogurt intervention study. And this is going to be my legacy study at CDL when I retire, if we can actually pull it off. In this yogurt intervention study, there's a lot of data that suggests the benefits of yogurt consumption. Yogurt has a lot for your gut health. There's also a lot of data out in terms of the gut-to-brain pathways, in terms of the impact of yogurt on cognitive functioning and especially emotional functioning. But all that data is on adult models. We don't know what goes on with children when they consume yogurt. But we know a lot of children eat yogurt on a very regular basis. So in this intervention study, children will be randomized at the classroom level, all children from the toddler classrooms on up, into treatment and control condition. When they're in the treatment condition, they will have doses every morning of a yogurt or yogurt-like product. And then the control condition kids in those classrooms, they'll get their standard snacks. And then what we're going to be doing is looking at the impact of that yogurt consumption on several different child outcomes. We're going to be looking at their gut microbiome. So over the course of the 8 weeks, well, it'll be actually 16 weeks of conditions because we flip-flop, we'll be collecting over 900 stool samples from these kids to see what's going on that way. We're going to be looking at what yogurt consumption does for those kids in the treatment condition on noontime meal consumption, because a lot of people use yogurt consumption as adults as a weight control mechanism. We want to see if it impacts the children's consumption at meals. We also want to look to see if yogurt consumption can impact cognitive functioning and, more importantly, executive functioning, and effortful control on the part of children. So we're going to be observing the behaviors of the kids when they're in these treatment conditions, consuming yogurt on a daily basis. This is a study that's huge in terms of logistics and so on. This is a study that you could never implement in a community-based childcare program. This is why lab schools exist, to do things that you can't do anyplace else. Again, this will be my legacy study when we pull it off. Another example of how we generate new knowledge. This is from some of the things like the observations and so on. The Kinesiology 262 class. Every week we get Kinesiology 262 students coming through our classes. Their weekly labs is in the Child Development Laboratory program. Every week they're talking about different developmental phenomena, motor-wise, and they come to observe and document differences in the children that they see. And they start off with the babies, and by the end of the semester, they're looking at the preschoolers and looking at all kinds of different developmental phenomena. Again, this is making the learning reality. Every semester, we get close to 200 students enrolled in this course who come through our doors for this supportive undergraduate education. Another way we generate new knowledge, the developmental assessment and screening class that I co-teach. Again, the only way children can generate, our students can generate this new knowledge is have the chance to practice developing and implementing these assessment tools in our classrooms. Very good learning experience for them. Another way in which we support generation new knowledge, we have Food Science and Human Nutrition 322 is a nutrition across their lifespan course. Every spring semester this class is taught. This class is for future dietitians. One of the things they do as their beyond the classroom learning experience for the course is they get assigned to children at the Child Development Laboratory, and then they get assigned to senior residents at the Clark Lindsay Senior Citizen Center, and then they do intensive dietary assessments. They observe what's going on in terms of their food intake during meals. They look at their health histories. They do interview parents and so on, and they develop a comprehensive understanding of what are these children and what are these seniors getting. So again, we're enhancing the learning experience for these future dietitians. Another way in which we support a generation of new knowledge through undergraduate education is our Nursing 341 class. This is a class, again, it's being taught this spring semester. It's taught every spring semester. The students enrolled in this course are coming to our program to learn how to do health screenings and anthropometric measurements of young children. That's what nurses do. Before they get to see the kid get to see a pediatrician, the nurse does all the hard work. They do the screening. They ask the right questions of the mother or the father who's taking them there. They do the weighing and measuring. If you've ever tried to weigh and measure like a 9-month-old baby, that's not easily done. Those nursing students are developing those skills by coming to us and practicing and developing that competency. Another way in which we support generation of new knowledge is through our internships and field placements. Yeah, we have the traditional early childhood education students working with us, our child development course students with us, but we also have students from special ed, social work, and so on. But what I find most intriguing is our integrated health sciences students who do their senior internship with us. These are students who are enrolled in a program that they know that they're going on to some sort of a graduate level health-related career type of training program after they get their undergraduate degree. But as part of their iHealth requirement, they have to do a semester-long internship. And we get students on a regular basis doing their internships with us as part of their learning experience. A good example, for this semester that just started, I've got a student who's, Luke, he's enrolled in the nursing program, or not the nursing program, iHealth program. He knows he's going to go to a graduate nursing program after he finishes his undergraduate degree. He knows nothing about young children. He knows nurses have to do a lot of things that are very tough, like give inoculations and so on. So he somehow came up with the idea, I need to learn how to distract the little kids. So what he's doing this entire semester is every 2 weeks he's going to the different classes and different age rooms, learning how to build rapport with children of that age, learning how they focus and what their level of focus is, and learning what you have to do to distract a kid. A wonderful learning opportunity. Another good example of an iHealth internship student. Last year, we had a student who she knew her career trajectory is to go into an OT program. And we have these 2 little boys enrolled in our program. They started with us as infants, twins. both born severely premature. One, development is doing great. The other, from the get-go, has had significant problems. They're still in the EI system, Part C. They receive a lot of services from OTs, PTs, a speech person, a nutritionist, and bottom line, though, is because they're still under the age of 3, they're receiving most of their services with our program. So this student, she knew that as an OT, a future OT, she needs to know what other professionals are doing with them. And she also was aware enough to know that OTs never talk to PTs, PTs never talk to nutritionists, and so on. So what she did is she made herself available. Every time this little guy was scheduled to receive services in our program, she made herself available. She took copious notes. And then she would quiz the different professionals, finding out why they're doing it and how that might relate to everyone else who's working with this child. And then she developed this 3-page report that she provided to our staff on how they can better integrate all these different kinds of services. Again, generating new knowledge. Now, talked a lot. I'm going to put my glasses on because I'm reading my notes now. I'm vain. When you think about all the different things that we do, balancing service and academic activities is very, very important. Because if you cannot provide that high quality early care and education for the kids, it doesn't matter what you want to do in terms of academic activities. So you have to figure out how do you balance these things. One thing that you need to think about as you try to balance academic and service is always keeping a lab school focus during all stages of development. Push comes to shove, the only reason you're on that campus is to support the academic mission. Bottom line is, at least on our campus, like when they built me this new building, my new lab school, they wanted to make sure that there was an academic mission. It wasn't just service, because the University of Illinois should not be engaged in a child care focus. That lab school focus needs to stay in place in all stages of your thinking and all stages of your development. The facilities need to support your academic activities. The site, when we built that new building, we went through like 3 months of site feasibility, looking at different options for where could we site this new building that would make the most sense, would meet the needs of students and researchers and faculty members and families. And we looked at a lot of different places, but lo and behold, right next door, there was a building that was raised and it made sense to put it right there. Developing cost models that balance or separate out the academic versus the service side is what you need to do. Lab school focus needs to be there all the time. A real good example of how this plays home is you have to convince your staff working in these lab schools, if they don't support the academic activities, they won't have jobs. So when we opened our new building, we opened it up in January of 2003. We had all of our staff hired at the beginning of December, and we used the whole month for staff development and staff training to get them ready. And one of the things I did right before the holiday break is I did a walkthrough, because at that point in time, all the teams of teachers had their classrooms set up and everything. Everybody was ready to go, so come January, everything would be in place. One of the things that I did is I walked into each one of our observation booths. And when I got into the observation booths looking into one of our 3 infant classrooms, lo and behold, right in front of the mirror was a loft, because all our infant rooms have lofts. And, infant lofts are yay big, so they're not like the big kids' lofts. But still, it was a problem because it prevented babies who were crawling and those who were starting to walk from coming close to the booth. And so I took the head teacher for that classroom. I said, come in here, what do you see? And she started pointing out all the different things of the way she set up her room. And I said, what do you see right there where you go see the babies crawl? Well, I can't see. I said, bingo. So let's think about moving it. And she had a real good reason for putting that loft right in front of the mirror. Basically, she was wanting to navigate traffic flow for the walkers and non-walkers. And that was a very natural way to make that distinction. But I said, we can't leave it there because students would not be able to see what you want them to see, the walkers and the non-walkers. So the lab school focus has to stay central in all parts of the planning. You also have to have physical facilities that will support our academic activities. You need things, like if you want to do research, you need to have spaces for researchers to do their thing. Not all research takes place in a classroom. Sometimes there are research that requires one-on-one exchanges between the data collector and the researcher, or the child. You need to have spaces for them to do that. You need to have observation booths to support undergraduate observations. and they need to be effective. You need to have staff offices, so when staff are doing a clinical meeting with a student teacher or an internship student, they can do it in a private space. You have to have the facilities to support that. The next one that I say you need to think about having a person in there is somewhat controversial. Not everybody agrees with this perspective. For lab schools to be truly integrated into teaching, research, and outreach and engagement, you need a tenured faculty in a leadership role. You do. When I have gone around from institution to institution working with different lab schools, ones that oftentimes find themselves struggling is there's no clearly identified leader who takes on the role of becoming the lab school person on that campus. And because of that, you often get this upstairs, downstairs mentality. Even if you are the director of the lab school or what, oh, that's just a lab school. We don't have to think about what it is you want to do. Oh, I'm so-and-so, I've got all this money, I want to do this collection project. You don't know, so I'm going to do it anyway. I'll go to your dean if you don't let me. If you have a tenured faculty member, that tenured faculty member can advocate for the science and the teaching, and if it's the right person, they can advocate for the teachers in the classroom and the children as well. That's when you see these tensions disappearing. Another thing that leads to success, you have to have financial support for these academic activities. Early on in my career, and Mary, where are you, Mary? At a NOCDOS meeting, I forget who it was, but the presenter was talking about the 10 commandments of lab school directors. Commandment number 1, parent fees shall not support undergraduate education and research. I truly believe that. If I'm a parent enrolling my child in a program to get high quality early care and education, I don't want to be paying for the cost of undergraduate education. I don't want to be paying for the cost of data collection. I don't want to be paying for the outreach efforts that you're doing. That's not what my parent fees are going for. And that's one of the things I think a lot of lab schools stumble with, is they're not able to separate this out. But you do have to have that support. On my campus, we've been able, over the 30 years I've been there, to be able to generate a lot of external support, external to the lab school, support for what it is that we do. So whenever my lead teachers are doing 30-minute clinical supervision meetings with student teachers, parents shouldn't pay for that. The university should pay for it. Our department should pay for it. Every time a teacher or a team of teachers is filling out 20 different rating forms on the child behavior checklist for a kid for a research project, parent fees shouldn't be paying for that. So one of the things that we've been able to do over the years, we get a lot of support, and I do mean a lot, of financial support from the Office of Vice Chancellor for Research for the way we support different kinds of research activities, from the Provost's office for the way we support research activities. And one of the things that's part of my salary, about a third of my salary, is supported by the Provost's office as well. One of the things that I always hear when I talk to the people in the big houses, what we give to you, it may seem like big money for you. So when we're talking about $35,000, $40,000 to support graduate research assistants from the Vice Chancellor for Research, that's huge for me. For them, that's a rounding error. When we're getting 3 months of my summer salary paid by the Provost's office, that's huge for my department head, the dean, and so on. That's rounding errors for the provost. But we're able to show them what is the return on their investment through things like showing how we support teaching, research, and outreach and engagement. And we do that with hard numbers. We don't say we do it, we show them the numbers. We also know that you need to have a fully functional business model that clearly separates and delineates activities for children and activities for the university community. Again, you have to separate out the two. Another factor that's critical for success is having that clearly articulated priority of missions. When you're trying to balance out the two, like I said earlier, push comes to shove, the academic mission will always trump, because otherwise you have no reason to exist there. Even things as simple as our enrollment procedures. I get a lot of pushback from families. Why can't I get my kid in here? I'm a faculty member over in chemistry. Why can't I get my child in this program? It's not a first come, first served basis. It's not a faculty club. We stratify enrollment across those 4 categories. We stratify based on socioeconomic status because we want to be a viable entity to provide to the academic community. And for like this past, or for this current school year that started in August, when we did our enrollment, we guarantee enrollment. So once a child starts, they can continue staying with us until their family needs end. Out of the 116 enrollment slots, we had 17 positions to fill. So you can imagine people wanting to get their kids in there and why. I know you have a toddler spot open, but yeah, we have a toddler spot for a girl who's a community family. They don't want to hear that. I have a toddler too, I want my child in there. So having that priority admission needs to be part of that. Having qualified staff in critical positions is important. Being a lab school teacher is not an easy thing, so you need to hire the best and the brightest that the community can offer to you. We also know we have to integrate ourselves into the department, college, and campus communities. People know me all across campus because I don't let them not know me. I'm a great marketer for the Child Development Laboratory on the University of Illinois. So anytime when we get our e-week announcement about what's going on campus, I see, oh, I should go talk to them. I do. And my position allows me to spend time building new relationships for potential new collaborations, one way in which we can become integrated. Another thing, this has always been my mantra. Let's don't do things because we've always done it this way. Let's think outside the box. My goal, if you're an instructor, my goal, if you're a researcher and you come to me and say, Brent, I've got an idea, here it is. My goal is to never say no. I may have to say, well, we'd like to do that, but let's think about alternative ways to get to the same endpoint, whether it's through your data collection protocol, the kind of teaching experiences you want for your students, whatever it might be. So you need to think outside the box. Recruitment and outreach to the university community is part of it. And then protocols, activities with vulnerable populations. We have an awful lot going on with our program. Those numbers can be very overwhelming to families. But we have protocols and procedures in place to protect the integrity of the lived experiences of the children when they're in our program. So you don't have to worry if you enroll your child in our program that they're going to be like rats in a maze, those kinds of things. We do have procedures to do it. Something as simple as we have our research tags. Every classroom, even with the babies, has this board about this big. Every child has a tag with their name on it, first names. On one side, the name is in green. On the back side, it's in red. So if you're doing data collection with a target like Jill, once Jill has been used for data collection on any particular day, her tag automatically gets turned to red. She's off limits for the rest of the day. Simple things like that help ensure that you have these protocols in place to protect the experiences of the children. And then you need a systematic way of reporting what it is you do. What little time I've been here on the KSU campus, I know that you guys are doing some things with your lab school, but I'm not sure anyone else knows about it. One of the things that we do is we have tools in place where we track everything that goes on. Every student who comes in to do observations, we know exactly what class it is, we know what their assignment for that observation is, and we know how long they were in the building to do that assignment. For every research project, we have it. And we report all of this information in our classic little annual report. This is a wonderful marketing and outreach tool. Basically what we do is a very low-key thing, but it summarizes all the different courses that we've supported through observations and class projects. It summarizes the different kinds of research projects. It summarizes the different kinds of internships and field placements. And every department head who has a student or a faculty member interact with us in a given year gets a copy of this report, both a hard copy and electronic copy. Every dean who's had a student or a faculty member come to us gets a copy of it. The provost gets a copy of it, the vice chancellor for research gets a copy of it, and the vice chancellor for institutional development gets a copy of it as well. We're out there. We want them to see what their return is on their investment in our program. Now, what else? Research babies, I won't take time because we're running out of time. Internal and external advisory boards, critical. If you do things at the level that we do them, you need to have constant mechanisms to get feedback. We need to be transparent in everything that we do. So when we launch this yogurt intervention study, we're going to have a series of parent meetings to explain exactly what it is that we're doing, why it is that we're doing it, and why it has to happen for the best interest of children, families, and communities as well. Having those external advisory boards and internal advisory boards will help us do that process. We also have web-based management tools. And one of the ways that we track everything we do is we use these web-based management tools. Last night, I had a teacher who sent me an email. I was sitting in the hotel room, the Blue Mont, is that it? Yeah, sitting and reading my email. And Jamie sent me this email saying, Dr. Smith over in education wants to do this project where she wants to interview teachers. And she knows Jamie, my teacher, because Jamie was enrolled in a graduate class of hers. And Jamie says, well, there's probably something that you need to do. So I was immediately able to respond to Dr. Smith and say, we have a protocol in place. Here's the link to the web-based tools so you can submit a research request form. On that research request form, you describe what it is you want to do, the target populations, the protocols you're going to use, your IRB approval, and so on. And then I have a team that reviews every request. Myself, my associate director, a CDL lab teacher, and a faculty member in the department. We don't evaluate science. We care about the science, but we don't evaluate the science per se. We evaluate the feasibility. Can we do what you're saying we do? But again, that information automatically populates into my email inbox. It gets dumped into a database, and I'm tracking it already. So we have these tools in place. We also have the marketing tools. We do a lot of outreach. I spend a lot of time talking to graduate student seminars in different departments across campus, just planting the seed so that they know what it is that we do and how we can support them. And then review and oversight, blah, 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 blah. Academic law. Lessons learned. One thing to remember, and then this applies here, start slow. Transitioning from childcare or early care and education to a lab school framework, a truly integrated lab school framework takes time. What you saw, what we do, 30 years in the making, and it was still a work in progress. Address the training needs of staff. If you want teachers to fully buy into this process, you need to better prepare them to be able to do so. Good early childhood teachers don't make good early lab school teachers, so you have to help them. And need flexibility in how you define teacher roles and scheduling. Turn on. This continued work in process demands constant reflection and feedback. Every time I come and talk to people, I learn about what they do, and I take something back home with me, and a commitment to the academic mission. Continued commitment to that academic mission. I went over my time, so. Questions? No questions. Yeah.
You're here for 2 more days.
Yeah, I'm here for 2 more days, so.
So you talked about the support for. Yeah, sorry. So you talked about the support for the tuition for families.
Yeah.
A couple of questions. Is that a sliding scale for the low-income families? And then what percent of your overall tuition is subsidized by your funding?
Sure. 2 very good questions. One, in terms of the fees themselves, we do have a sliding fee schedule that we take care of internally with target goals for each classification. So we have full paying families, partial 1 and partial 2, which to get a reduction. But then about a third of our families receive CCAP, Child Care Assistance Program, vouchers from the state of Illinois. That pays for their cost of the tuition. In terms of the overall operating budget, that $1.4 million, if you don't include facility upkeep and so on, probably close 75% comes from parent tuition fees and the subsidies. The rest comes from the campus. But again, those operating costs don't count for the monies that are coming from my salary. They don't account for the monies that are coming from the VCR's office to support research assistants who help me do all this and manage this endeavor. So the $1.4 million is just pure direct operation of the programming for children. Did that answer your question? Okay. Other questions? Yeah. Oh.
Has any research been done that follows a child into adulthood, that any kind of predictive behaviors, successes or failures, anything?
You're not the first person that's asked me that. We have people who access our database. We have a database on every child. Once they get enrolled in our program, we start tracking them. And we add information to this database on a yearly basis. So all the screening information gets added into there, family histories and so on get in there. And then every research project that comes through, we approach them about sharing information with the database. So like if you're coming through and you're working with preschoolers and you're looking, one small piece of your project might be peer relationships, and you're doing social metric ratings of the children in the classrooms that you're collecting data from, we ask the researchers to add that information to our database. Because the next person who might be looking at something like food intake may also say, oh yeah, how they get along with their peers and are they sitting next to their best friends, eat differently, they can access that information from our database. We stop that at age 5 when they transition away from us. Wouldn't it be wonderful to look at what they're doing? Because I've been there long enough now, I've got former children sending their kids to us. Wouldn't it be nice to see how successful they were as a result of what we did for them? Funding is an issue there. One of the things that we are doing, we are in the process of developing a conceptual framework for a laboratory school consortium, where we're going to link up different lab schools around the nation to look at joint and reciprocal data collection across the different institutions, and then to put it all into this huge database. And one of the things that we're talking about is how can we use that database then to make available to researchers to do these long-term longitudinal types looks at what goes on. So good question, though.
Hi. Well, you just answered one of my questions, so I just have one question left. The yogurt study, how are you defining that yogurt? Is it high, full fat, no fat? Does it have sugar? I mean, yogurt is...
I leave that up to Dr. Donovan, and one of the tricky parts why this kind of a study can only be done in our lab school is that when we look at the content and the way the yogurt was processed, there are lots of variations. So we're picking one format of processing for the yogurt to be consistent across the 8-week intervention. And then for those kids in the control condition, for their morning snacks, we're taking items and doing a nutritional assessment of the snacks to match the sugar content and the calorie content of that. So if they're getting a 1/4 cup of yogurt, what can we pull from our standard snack menus that would match the sugar and calorie content from that yogurt? Because again, like sugar consumption affects behavior and so on. So, yeah. Good question. Other questions?
Thank you, Dr. McBride.
Yes.
Clearly, you have way more information than you're able to share with us.
But I will be talking to a lot of folks too.
Yes. And in fact, we have packed your schedule so tight that I think you're supposed to be somewhere else right now.
Am I late?
Perhaps. So if you have forgotten or you haven't looked ahead on the schedule, he will be doing a faculty presentation that anyone is welcome to join us for tomorrow. Anybody looking at the schedule? I believe it's 12:30. Justin 254.
Presentation or conversation?
Conversation.
Okay, I was going to say, I don't have anything else.
You can do this all over again.
No.
So if you have any follow-up questions, feel free to send them to me or anybody else you may know in the room, and we will be happy to pass it along.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Who's taking Jennifer? You're going back to Stonehouse.
Okay.
Thank you, Barbara. You know, I was worried that would happen because we have so much to learn from you.